Okay, so welcome to the Soul Patch, and we are recording today. It's the 4th of November, and if anyone's been following international news, you would all know that there was a crazy tragedy that happened here last week in Itaewon. And we're not going to spend any time talking about what happened and what went wrong or what could have changed, because that's not our job here.
Hmm.
But we do just want to say that, I mean, all three of us have spent time in Itaewon, have spent a lot of time in Korea, and it was an epic tragedy. And it's just really sad that so many people, so many young people lost their lives in this. And so here at the Soul Patch, our hearts go out to all of the victims there. And I know we've got
And their
some
families.
students
Yeah.
at our university and other universities, a lot of young people, and it's just
Hmm.
it's tragic. So we kind of have to say something because it is, the news of the week here in Korea. But you can find out all the details and all the information on so many other internet sources if you want. But it is sad. It is tragic.
Yep.
Um, but let's just go ahead and try and get into our normal things for today.
Right.
And actually, I something interesting before we get into our main topics, Jack, something kind of fun experiences. These are the things that always uh still surprise me about Korea. There's these small things that happen to you, almost every day or every week, and it's like, well, that wouldn't happen back in the States.
Yeah.
And I got on the subway a few days ago, heading to campus in the morning, and someone had either gotten sick on the ground or spilled something. It didn't look just like a spill of coffee. There was just like some weird liquid on the ground.
Oh.
Anyway, yeah, not good. It was something dirty in the morning.
Yeah.
And the first few people who get on the subway, me included, just step over it and go and sit down somewhere away from it. And a few people kind of avoid those seats, even though
Right.
it's on the ground, like we're avoiding it. But then suddenly an older dude who was sitting in one of the like the older dude seats on the side of the subway cars.
Yeah. Yeah.
He stands up, he walks over with like a handful of tissue that he just dug out from his backpack and like drops it on the floor and starts wiping it up with his shoe, like kind of mopping it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then he ran out of tissues and immediately he goes over and he pulls out his phone, he takes a picture of it. And maybe you know why he's taking a picture of it, but I'll continue this in a second. So then another older dude goes into his backpack and starts digging through, and he's got like a bunch of tissues as well. And between the two of them, they ended up almost completely cleaning this thing up, like by themselves, just a couple of dudes. One guy spent like 2 or 3 minutes just dropping tissues on the ground, moving his foot around. Like he didn't want to get his hand dirty. He's not there to
No,
totally clean it,
that's awful.
but just like
Yeah.
pushing the tissues around to kind of sop up the mess and push it to the side. And then and this is all in the span of about 20 to 30 minutes max, because I only ride the subway quick. Before I even got off the car, I realized why those guys had been, two of them actually, both of those guys who'd been working to tidy it up. Now there was like a pile of tissue basically of that they'd pushed to the side and gotten it off.
Yeah.
But the reason that they had taken pictures and they were on their phone was because they were sending reports to the subway apps or to the I don't know how they do it. So before I even got off the subway, suddenly at one of the stops, the doors open up and a small cleaning crew of three people gets on really quick. The subway cars stay open for it. They get in, they see that it's already mostly cleaned, but they had like a mop and everything ready to tidy
Yeah.
it in case no one had done anything. But they just quickly mop it up, get off the subway car. We were delayed by like 30 seconds, and then the subway went on its way. So
Yeah.
in the span of maximum 30 minutes, someone had made a spill on the subway. Some citizens had taken it upon themselves to clean this up. And then the officials had gotten notified and came on and actually properly cleaned it up. And within that span, before I even got off the subway car, it was like nothing had ever happened and it was just totally
Right.
clean. And I don't know what the subway system is like in New York or Chicago these days. I have taken them, but I just can't imagine that it would have been, taken care of by the citizens and been completely clean before half the people even noticed it.
No, no.
I was
I mean
pretty
that
impressed.
your story kind of depresses me a little bit, like because I do think about the kind of comparing the two, like the
Hmm.
urine stench of the New York subway and
I don't,
versus
I
the
I would say I think that urine stench that you mentioned, I think that's a stereotype.
I don't
Um,
know. Well,
which
maybe it could be. I've never
I
ridden
think that's a
the subway
stereotype
in New
based
York.
on like the 1980s New York subway.
Right.
Like Heesun and I, we were there, shit. It was quite a few years ago already, maybe 7, 8 years ago. We did like a tour of New York City and we rode the subways around and everything. And I definitely remember them being older and not as nice as the Seoul subway system.
Yeah.
But it didn't look like when I remember watching movies as a kid of, like
Yeah.
the
It wasn't
totally
like the
graffiti
Warriors or
covered.
anything like that, like the
Yeah,
movie The
I
Warriors.
think
Yeah.
New York from the 80s and 90s to today is a completely different thing. So it's not, I still don't think it's as nice as the Soul system, but I don't think
Yeah.
it's urine stenched
Okay.
as
Oh, I was
we
stereo I
think.
was yeah, I was the stereotype of it being just kind of filthy
Yeah,
and disgusting with
but
yeah.
I still was just impressed at how people took it upon themselves to tidy it up for others, not for themselves, but
Hmm.
for other people, and to report it to the appropriate authorities, however they did so. And then it all got tidied up. It was just something really cool that I saw. I was like, wow, good job, Korea. Good job, Koreans. Good job, Seoul. It was
Yeah,
something
I mean,
cool.
it is just it has a really well functioning kind of I don't know, civic duty or whatever. I don't know how to explain it, but
In a lot of
there's
ways,
something
I mean,
like my neighborhood,
I
like
think
people,
we've talked about this a
yeah.
little bit with language before, and this is something that I've always found interesting. I mean, Korea has this us culture, the uri culture.
Yeah.
Uri means we in Korean. And there is this, people are all kind of together in some ways. And I think that's where you see this in small things like this. People take it upon themselves to tidy up public spaces, even
Hmm.
though, they have no responsibility for it necessarily.
Well, I was listening to this lecture about Korean history, and the guy was
Hmm,
talking
cool.
about like after the Korean War, Korea was maybe the poorest country in the world. Like I
I've
had
seen
no
that. I've
idea
seen
that
that statistic.
that they were that destitute. Literally, there were African nations that were don't giving money to aid,
Yeah.
providing aid to Korea, which
Yeah, I've seen that before.
yeah. So to go from the poorest country in the world to what, eighth largest economy in
Something
the
like
world
that. Top
in
10,
a span of
definitely.
like a generation is just
Mm,
it's a miraculous, it's a miracle. And so you have to have that. Without that udi, the community, the sense of us, like we're in this together, there's just, if you're atomized and individualistic, there's just no way you could pull yourselves out of that. It would just be everyone
yeah.
fighting over scraps of food for a generation. But instead they just worked together and just got it done.
Yeah, it's something
So
I know we've talked about talking about this before, and we don't have time for it today, and I haven't
mhm.
done the research on it, but I mean, a great example of what you're saying is the how Korea dealt with the IMF crisis
Right,
and how
selling their
people came
gold, and
together.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And for everyone
Yeah.
listening, we'll come back to that at some point because
Yeah, right,
that's a full episode on its own.
right, right.
But yeah, Korea definitely has this us feeling, and they take care of the us, the we here.
Yeah, yeah. You feel that. You see it, and and when it functions so well, you're kind of like, gosh, I wish that would I wish we could somehow translate that to American culture, but it's just, it's tough. It just doesn't, I don't know.
It's the
It's a
the
different
I versus the we. It's a very different
yeah,
thing. Yeah, individualism.
yeah.
And that's changing here in Korea a bit as well. So I was still, that's why, like, when I saw that happen, I mean, a lot of people passed over, the mess. A lot of people didn't take
Yeah.
any care for it. But just the fact that some people did, a couple people did, was cool. Was interesting to see.
Yeah, yeah. No,
But
yeah.
let's go on. So we've got a couple of main topics for today, things that I spotted in the news. The first is let's talk about the Seoul planning to create a Champs Elysees style walkway from Gwanghwamun to the
Right.
Han River. I mean,
What the president was
I'm
in France, right? Wasn't
um
the president visited France, I believe, and that's where he got the idea for.
I think that yeah that they were definitely were looking around and they saw that.
Mhm. Yeah, so what is the exact route that it's going to
So
take? It starts where?
it starts at Gwanghwamun,
Hmm.
which is kind of like that's where it's near where the Blue House is, where the old presidential palace was, although he's moved.
Yeah.
It's downtown. It's where actually, if any Americans who've been in Seoul, that's near where the U.S. Embassy is, of
Oh, right,
course.
right. Yeah.
I mean, that street already, like Gwanghwamun Street, that street already has gone under a big undertaking, and they've like really revamped it. That's where like the King Sejong statue is. That's where
Hmm.
the Isun Shin statue is. Both people I also actually would love to do a podcast about at some point because they're amazing figures in
Yeah,
history.
yeah, exactly.
And then, so from what I understand, it would basically start there. Like the plan is that it would probably start there around Gwanghwamun, and that main road leads down to the city hall.
Hmm.
Basically, like that same road just leads down to City Hall, and then it would basically follow the road down from like Namdaemun to Seoul Station, which is all
Hmm.
there, then down to Samgakji. That's where I take the bus every day, so I would definitely notice this. And then basically from Samgakji, that's straight just all the way down to the Han River.
Was it, did you read it correctly? It was like 7 or 8 kilometers? That's how
It's
long
about
it's
that.
gonna be?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's about 7 or 8 kilometers, which is epic. I mean, if they really turned this
Yeah.
into And no, I don't actually know what the Champs Elysees is. It's just
It's
it's
just
a
a famous
it's like a
street, right? It
just a
just,
famous street. Yeah, like
yeah.
I can't picture it in my head. Um, but I guess Paris was like they're working on the Champs Elysees, and so Korea was like, oh, we can do that too.
Yeah. I mean, what is
And
just it's just a well manicured path essentially where you can walk and it's beautiful. There are things to look at. I mean, I think
mhm.
that's the and then the where you end up like in the what's the Seine River? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Oh,
Seine,
yeah, whatever.
something like that.
Je ne parle pas français. I do not speak French.
I can't even pronounce the river name. But yeah, I
Oh,
mean you end
Seine?
up
I think Seine.
yeah, you end up like you've got the beautiful river, you've got Notre Dame, you've got
Mm,
all these like really beautiful sites. So I think they're kind of thinking around the same idea with Seoul is like why can't we
yeah.
have a nice manicured path?
I mean, that
Um
would be amazing.
yeah.
I'd be very much in fan of it. Although there are a couple of issues that I can see happening. First, though, I something interesting. Remember that, like, so that plan basically goes right by Samgakji, right? Like I
Hmm.
was saying, Samgakji is where Samgakji and around there, just to the east of Samgakji Station, and then north and south of there. That's where the old military base was that has
Ah,
been
okay.
moved out of Seoul.
Right.
And one thing that I've heard rumors of for
Yeah,
pretty
the
much
park,
since I
right?
arrived in
Yeah.
Seoul, yeah, is that eventually that military base, if the military leaves, which they have now, is that that Seoul would turn it into a big park, like a
Right.
central park, because it would be central. It's right in the center
Yeah,
of Seoul,
yeah. Right, but it's also
and
worth billions of
oh,
dollars
yeah,
of
yeah,
real estate,
literally.
I mean,
Um, so that's where I'm a bit skeptical. I've always
hmm
been skeptical, like, will they really turn it into a park or
well,
not?
or they just pare it down to like, like it's a little tiny park with a whole lot of apartments around
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so we'd have to see what would happen there. But I mean, this lends some credence to the fact that maybe they are planning to turn it into a park because I mean, this would basically be right next to it. It's
Hmm.
like it's a part of this. I don't know what they would call it, like Korean Champs-Elysees.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it
and
is a
so,
perfect kind of combination of like
right.
the Paris and New York. It's kind of like you've got
Yeah,
your
big
Central
big
Park,
park and
but you've got your beautiful street that you can. I mean, I think how do you say it? Champs Elysees? Something like
something
that?
like that.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Champs-Elysees.
I apologize to our French speakers. Yeah, I mean, I think that has much longer history, obviously,
Mm,
than they're trying to create something like that. But um, it is cool. I mean, I do think that they're trying to beautify Seoul.
mm,
Like they're making a real effort. I mean, and even I know you said we weren't going to talk about the Itaewon tragedy, but just Itaewon in general has been kind of gentrified in the last like
very
15
much.
years. Yeah. I mean, it's just like cobblestone road walkways, and it's just a totally different neighborhood than what I
Oh
remembered
yeah.
from,
Oh yeah.
15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, when
So
I first came to Korea, Itaewon was like, I don't want to say sleazy, but
yeah, I know what you
almost
mean.
like
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
was like oh, be careful in Itaewon. Like that's crazy. There's a bunch of drunk foreigners there, which is
Yeah.
true. But
It was
uh
true, right?
but it was more than that. It was like yeah, definitely a kind of almost sketchy neighborhood. I mean, you're still not dangerous necessarily, but just yeah, a little bit dirtier. And now it's not. at all.
No,
Like
every
at all.
little hole in the wall bar is now like a nice wine bar,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah,
like the
there's
yeah, it just became kind of an upscale neighborhood. So I mean,
mhm.
there
I
are
kind of
the
miss
only
the old Itaewon at least a little bit. Like
oh no,
the
I totally
flavor
missed the
of it,
sketch of it. Yeah, absolutely.
like just
Yeah,
yeah, there was just so much more personality and to it. And you're right, now it's just all yeah, wine bars and cigar bars and coffee
right.
shops and stuff.
Right. It's just it's yuppie.
A lot of good food. There is a lot of good food there still.
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
um,
Yeah, I guess the only problem that Seoul has that I could see is you can't make the city larger. So the
mhm,
roads are, I mean, when I went down to the
yeah,
embassy, we drove down there, and I mean, I swear, like just from like Gosok Terminal, the express to bus terminal area, and you're driving around there, um, it just takes forever to get, even 2 kilometers. 20 minutes. You're
yeah,
waiting at a red light, and you're moving so slowly, and it's just crazy. And there's
and
nothing they
that's
can really do about that.
well, that's one of the big things. Well, I kind of disagree with you and get into this in a second, but that's probably the biggest complaint or controversy or issue with this Korean Champs Elysees. They don't have a name for it yet. I don't know what the
Right,
hell to
yeah.
call it. But with this proposed walkway or whatever, is that those roads are very busy roads.
Yeah.
Very busy roads. I mean, Seoul itself already has a traffic problem. Like it just does. But those roads are already very busy roads. And like that, one of the areas that passes by is where the new presidential residence is as well. So, I mean, this is just gonna like, multiply congestion by, multiple
Right. The
multitudes.
construction aspect, and then
Oh, and
also
then,
how are they gonna make this like a straight shot without having to like go through any sort of like traffic or whatever. So I'm just
yeah,
wondering how they're gonna
I,
pull this off.
yeah,
So
the one thing that I would love to see, and I think they can pull it off, but I think this along with a lot of other issues. I mean, we were talking about like, birth rate and test scores and things. All of these have the same things where e nothing is by itself, everything is combined with something else. And
mhm.
if they do this, that would be great. But then there's a bigger issue, which is that Seoul is not it's not really like a bike friendly city, right? It's not really a walking friendly city. And there's still a lot of cars. And so
Mhm.
I think if they turned like if they put some bike lanes, some really nice bike lanes in the city. I mean, Seoul is great for biking on the river, but
Yeah,
if you're
yeah,
away
yeah.
from the river, it's really not fun. And so I think if they tried to promote Seoul as more of a, biking, walking, use mass transit more, try to get people not driving as much as possible, then it would be
Yeah.
great. Um,
Well, that brings me to like another issue that is interesting. And so, as our listeners out there know that we're teachers, my students are coming into classes with like bruises and cuts and
wait, what?
because of those scooters,
Oh,
those damn scooters that are just everywhere, and these like electric bicycles and stuff. They're
mm,
just they're just everywhere, just dumped on the road, just left everywhere, and people are using them, but they're falling down and getting hurt, and they're
mm,
also riding them on the streets with cars because
yeah,
like you said,
it's dangerous.
there's no like bike path. So because a lot of these roads is in Gyeonggi where I live, and then also in
Mm,
Seoul, were never designed with like with sidewalks really. The
right.
sidewalk was kind of an afterthought, or there was no sidewalk. And
For
so
the small roads.
yeah,
Yep.
and it's just really, really dangerous.
Small
And so,
neighborhood roads.
yeah, so I'm just those kinds of issues I think are something that I just wonder, like you said, we need more alternatives to driving. But
Yeah, I would love to see. I mean, Japan, like Tokyo, Osaka, those are amazing biking cities.
mhm.
Like they've done really good things there. I actually saw something else about, I think it was France, actually. I think where the mayor there is turning like an area of the city into a no car area.
Oh, right.
Um,
And they also
and
instituted a 30-kilometer maximum speed limit in the entire city, I
oh,
think. So it's like you'd
right.
have
So
to drive so slowly that no one's going to want to drive in
and so I
Paris.
think like this whole road, this walkway can work really well, but then they need to implement other things. That's what I was trying
Hmm.
to say earlier. Like
Yeah.
it's not just isolated. It can't just if they only do this, it's just going to mess up, you know, traffic even worse. But if they do some other things along with it, then it could make for an even more beautiful city that
Hmm.
I'd be, happy to walk around and bike around. It'd be great.
Yeah, it sounds like they're trying. They're definitely putting the effort in. So it'll be interesting to
Mm,
see if they. I mean, who knows? It's
yeah.
all
And at this
it's
point, it's just talk.
yeah, exactly. Because
But
like
they're
you
just
said,
saying
that
let's
park
let's
thing,
make
I've
this.
I heard that Yongsan Park for 15 years.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
still
easily.
waiting.
I think it was like the
Yeah,
first thing I heard when I first arrived in Itaewon. It's like, don't worry,
right.
one day it's going to be a park.
Gonna be a big park, big beautiful park. Um,
Um,
the maybe that kind of takes us to like the second. It dovetails nicely with that second issue, which is the
Transportation, yeah, it
yeah,
works really well.
yeah.
Yeah, so the second article is that the base taxi fare is going to be going up in Korea sometime soon, next year, February, it looks like.
Yeah.
And so it's raising 1,000 won to a base fare of 4,800 won.
There's still
Right. So
just nothing compared to America. Yeah.
I'll never forget when a bunch of years ago already, again, my wife and I were going back to the States, and we were running a little bit late for our plane. Not crazy late, but just like taking the bus will get us there just on time. So we're like, let's take a cab. And so I'll never forget because we took a cab from our house, and at the time we were living in Yongsan. And so we took a cab from there to the airport. It probably took us 45, 50 minutes. It's a
Yeah.
long cab ride. And it cost about maybe Oman won, like 50,000 won.
Oh
All
wow.
right,
Okay.
total. Not
Okay.
bad,
Not
honestly.
bad.
Not
Yeah.
bad. I mean, it was not rush hour. It was just straight there. So 50,000 won, we're like, okay, I mean, it was more expensive than taking the bus or the subway, but we're here on time. It's all worth it. So then we flew. We arrived in upstate New York to visit my grandparents, and we'd been traveling for 24 hours at this point. We arrived late at night. We needed to get
Let's
to our
take a
hotel.
taxi.
And we were like, "Hey, F it. Let's just take a cab. Like, I don't care." Like, so I went out, flagged a cab.
Whoops. Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't ridden a taxi in the States I had no
You
idea
must
how
have been
long.
watching that meter and just
Oh my
white
God.
knuckling like
I was I was
listen.
watching the meter
Yeah.
before we even left the goddamned airport parking lot.
Yeah.
It's ticking up 50 cents, 50 cents, 50 cents, 50
Ah.
cents. Um, and we rode
Yeah.
no, it was like a 15-minute
Yeah.
ride, and we arrived, and it was like $50 plus you got a tip, of course. So I was like, what
Yeah.
the hell? So yeah, taxis in Korea, even if they go up to 4,800 won, um, it's still relatively cheap compared to global taxis around the world.
Oh yeah. And also
It's too bad Ryan's not here today because he was saying just last week that he's a big taxi guy.
that's
This
right.
is this is his topic.
He does them just for rides them just for fun, I think. Um the uh the reason they raised the price was because people are having such a hard time. Again, I not to uh go back to Itaewon, but getting a taxi out of there in became a big problem. So the people were
Taxis,
waiting till 6 in the morning. You couldn't get it, you
yeah.
just couldn't get a taxi. And so how do you get
Yeah,
home,
I've heard a lot of people complaining about that. I
Yeah.
don't take taxis. I'm not out in the middle of the night anymore, but yeah,
Yeah, no,
I've
like,
heard
yeah,
that.
I'm in bed at 9 o'clock. So yeah, it's
I've heard that one of the reasons is because taxi companies, from what I understand here in Korea, taxi companies are, well, a lot of taxi drivers rather than the company are kind of freelancers,
yeah,
right?
yeah, right. Well, they get
And
their
so,
certificate or whatever, or their license or something,
mm,
and that's kind of like you're your own business essentially.
yeah. Or
Yeah.
sometimes they work for a company, but I think they basically can just set their own hours. They just do whatever the hell they want.
Oh, okay,
And
okay.
and so that's the problem is a lot of taxi drivers. I mean, you'll know, think about the last 20 times you've taken a taxi. 19 of those 20 times, the taxi driver was an older dude,
Yeah,
right? Probably. And so these older guys, like, they don't want to drive at night. They're like, it's not worth it. And so a lot of taxi drivers, they just drive during the daytime. And then they're like, I'm done. I'm off my shift. I made my own hours today. And
yeah.
so just taxi drivers just don't run at night because they just don't want to.
So they're trying to
And
make it
so,
worth their while. Like if with
right.
that extra 1,000 won, they
And then
believe
remember that
that'll.
that's the base fare just for daytime. Nighttime fares, actually, another part of this article is that because at nighttime, the taxi fares already go up. I think it's 20% more. I
Mhm.
could be wrong on that. Um, but they're actually lowering that. So it used to be either midnight or 11 p.m. where the taxi fares went up. that's going to be now 10 p.m. So starting at like 10 p.m., it's going to be even more expensive to ride a taxi, which again will hopefully incentivize taxi drivers to be there
Hmm.
and to go out and drive to alleviate it.
Yeah, that was my understanding, is that they're trying to incentivize the taxi drivers to go out more at night and
Hmm.
stop this problem from, people just not being able to get a cab, just can't get
Right,
home. It's
which is no good.
yeah.
Because the thing with this, and you and I are, I mean, we're big union supporters, right?
Yeah, right.
And this really comes from the taxi union here in Korea is really powerful. Like they're a very strong union. And now normally I would be very in support of that, power to the people, let's go for the workers. But the taxi union is almost too much, I think, and I don't know how and why this is exactly.
Hmm.
But like the taxi union, I mean, so you were saying like, people are getting stuck out in the middle of the night and they can't get home.
Right.
Well, they can't get a cab because they pretty much don't run, and it's very difficult. Like there's 100 people trying to get a cab and there's three taxis. So that's the problem. But the buses don't run late at night. The subways don't run late at night
Right.
here. So there's no way to get home. But the reason that the subways don't run late at night is because of those damn taxi unions.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so like these taxi unions, when I was looking into this article a little bit, I was reading some comments about it, and these taxi unions, they are like they've pushed back at a lot of things that I think we really need in the city to just, be better for the overall people, not just the taxi people. Like late night buses, we need that. Subway cars late at night. It doesn't have to run every 10 minutes, but
Hmm.
we need some subways late at night. Like we can't just protect the taxi companies. Um, Apparently these taxi companies and their unions, they've also pushed against bicycle lanes. We were talking about bicycling earlier.
Like
Like
any
the city needs more
competition,
bicycle. Yeah,
just shut it
they don't
down.
want that. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, like I understand that the taxi drivers need money, but we need bike lanes. Like bike lanes is good for everyone.
Yeah.
Um, Apparently the union has also pushed back on things like speed limiters. They've pushed things on like alcohol checks, which they shouldn't be drinking and driving. But these are things.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the taxi union. I mean, I'm happy for them that they're getting some money, and I really do hope that they get a living fare because, from what I understand, taxi drivers do not make enough money in Korea,
Hmm.
and that's just not. They should have a living wage, of course. But some of the things that the taxi union pushes up against is that they're overstepping in some ways,
Yeah,
in my
no,
opinion.
I agree. Well, this is an interesting conversation because I've seen a trend in Korea that it's trending more towards like the American style. So, for example, you've got Walmart that's open 360, 24/7, 365, right? It's just
Mm,
every holiday you got people working there. Korea used to be closed down for like the Chuseok holiday, and you'd be hard to go to a store, and they were closed. Like it would
mm,
you didn't they didn't make people work on holidays, like there was like just it was inconvenient, but there was a kind of it was kind of interesting. Like there was a kind of respect for people's right to have that holiday time with their
hmm
family, and that kind of changed over the years. So they started with these big, what do you call it, big supermarkets or whatever, these
right.
chains, and they're open on the actual holiday, and there's they've got people working on on the holiday, like when I
Although
what I mean.
big
So
supermarkets don't they still need to close every, what is it, second and fourth Sunday of the month? Is that?
sometimes in other cities it's like Wednesday in
Oh,
Ansong, which is weird, and then but yes, it's like every second Sunday in Pyeongtaek
yeah,
where I
and that's
live.
basically just
Yeah.
to support like the mom and pop shops. Like if you want to
Yeah.
shop on those days, you have to go to the small neighborhood stores.
Yeah, I mean it's like it's the thing where like I go to the States and I love diet soda, and there's like 25 different flavors, like diet Dr. Pepper and what, just the most ridiculous stuff. And we just don't have all that stuff here because they are protectionist, right? They just want to support the local economy and the local producers, and not just
Mm,
import everything and sell it for you know, 10 cents or whatever. And it's just like that. I do kind of appreciate that sort of mentality of like protecting, but I feel like it's losing its grip a little bit in Korea. It's just starting to go
Mm,
the way of like all Western, countries. And so when the taxi union is fighting for this, I think what they're seeing is they're kind of reading the tea leaves and saying like, we give an inch, they're going to take a mile. Like we give an inch and then Uber is going to come in and we're done. And so,
maybe. And I think for things like Uber and Kakao Taxi pushing back against those, I kind of understand it. But again, like
mhm.
the taxi union, I mean, when they're pushing back against speed limit checks and alcohol checks
Yeah,
and
that's
bike lanes,
ridiculous. Yeah.
that's pushing too much. Like I think the taxi that's where it's a very interesting union situation. I mean, again, I support them and having living wages, I'm all for. But like, and I understand why they don't want subways and buses to be open late at night because, if people are on the subways and they're not going to take taxis. But if you're going to push against having the subways open late at night, then you better damn well provide service
You're right.
because otherwise people literally cannot get home, and that's a problem. Um,
That's a great point. That's a great point. I think that would be a great negotiating tactic right there. It's like if you're not gonna uphold your end of the bargain and
yeah.
give
Yeah,
people
they're arguing in bad faith. It's like, nope, no
right,
subways
right.
late at night, but then they're like, okay, and I'm gonna go home and sleep. Like,
Yeah,
no.
I'm not working at night. Yeah, that is ridiculous. And I do agree. Yeah, I don't know. It's all about finding that, that kind of balance between the two sides. Um,
It's interesting how some
yeah.
unions, I know this is a bit off topic of Korea, but like some unions are just so powerful. And again, I like unions. I'm very pro-union, but the taxi union here seems almost too big. It's like the police union in America. I mean, they're just,
Yeah.
they control way too much. And so the taxi union here, how they're almost too powerful. So I don't know. I don't know how to control it. Again, yeah. But this small pay raise, just to go back to the main story,
Yeah.
I mean, it'll barely affect me. I take, one or two taxis a year. So I'm not too worried about it. But I do remember when I first came to Korea, taxis were 1,900 won, I think, for the first, start. It was
I
nothing.
know. Yeah, it was like
So cheap.
17. 2002 is when I first came here. Yeah, it was so cheap. I couldn't
Yeah.
believe it. It was,
So, I mean, it feels
yeah.
like it's a lot more, especially for me, because I take taxis so rarely that when I do get in and suddenly I see this number, I'm like, wait, no, the taxi's supposed to be really cheap. And then it's still not bad, but just compared to the last time I took a taxi, which was probably, two pay raises ago, it seems like a massive jump.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't take taxis too often, but the problem is like I drive, and
Mm,
so I'm contributing to the problem, pollution, to traffic, and all those things,
yeah,
and so I would love an alternative, like a better I mean, they have a wonderful transportation system, but you're right. Like if we could fill the gaps at night, it would make a huge difference. So, yeah.
definitely. That's the biggest complaint. And if this works, if this does help the taxi drivers come out at night so that people can get home, then I'm all in favor of a small, well, a decent sized pay raise for the taxi drivers. Because I've
Yeah.
had a lot of friends complain about trying to get a cab, and they're like, the plan is either you go home at 8 p.m. when the taxis are
Yeah,
still
yeah.
running, or you're out until 6 a.m. when the taxis come back. And it's like there should be some middle ground
Well,
there.
if you're partying, there's nothing worse than like leaving at like 10:30 to get the last subway train because
Mm,
your buzz is probably just like you're just it's just kicked in and you're just you're
yeah,
grooving, man. Like you're right there
the
in the sweet
subways, I
spot.
really do wish, especially on weekends, they really should run more like later at night or throughout
Yeah,
the night.
yeah. It is crazy. And then by like two or three, you're just, hammered and all you want to do is go to bed and you can't get home. And I've been there where I just like sit waiting for the subway to open at 6 o'clock in the morning
Yep,
and
I took
for
the
like
first car
three
home
hours. Yeah, it's
a
just
few times.
oh, it sucks, man. It's really terrible. So yeah, I totally agree that it's problematic. What about this? Like, I mean, the another issue that I think in Korea is experiencing is like stagnant wages with like cost of living increases and inflation. So like this taxi price goes up, but is that going to affect people? I mean, people that are kind of um already squeezed. Do you think there's going to
Yeah, I
be
mean,
pushback? I mean,
inflation for all of
yeah.
our American listeners, they know there's massive inflation, but it's here too, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I will say Korea has done very well is that I remember when I first came to Korea, the minimum wage here was nothing. It was like
Yeah, it was
4,000
terrible.
won
Yeah.
something per hour. Over the past 6 years or so, don't quote me on that, but over the past few years, it's been going up a little bit every year, which is amazing. Right now, the current minimum wage, I talked to my students, I don't know the exact number, but it's a little bit over 9,000 won.
Yeah, I mean, what's the American the minimum wage in the U.S. is like $7 and
Seven and
fifty
change,
cents or
and it's been
something.
that way for like over a decade
Yes,
or
yes,
something. So it's
yeah.
terrible. So
Could
that's
you
one thing that
imagine?
America or that Korea is still doing much better. Like they actually are raising the minimum wage, and I
Yeah,
believe I think my student said it's going to be going up again next year.
yeah,
And so I don't know what the current plan like. I don't know if it's going up every year or how they track it, but for the past many years it has gone up, and it's going up again next year. I think next year it's going to be up over Manwon, up over 10,000 per
okay.
hour, which I mean, that's great. Students, people working minimum wage jobs. I mean, there's a lot of older people who work minimum wage jobs.
Hmm.
There's like all those, ajumas who work in supermarkets and things like that. Like they're making minimum wage. And so that's great. That needs to support it. I mean, inflation is still a problem, and there's a lot of people who are not getting raises. Of course, that's an issue, but I'm glad at least the minimum wage is going up. So there's some
Yeah.
care
Well,
for
like you said,
populace.
elderly poverty is a big problem here too, especially
Mm,
elderly is who don't have kids. Is
mhm.
it's a big problem too. So you're right. Like a lot of people, they're forced into retirement and then still need to supplement their income with a part-time job, doing
Yeah,
minimum wage jobs. So
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
minimum
should
wage
be
is not
higher.
only for high
Yeah.
school students. Minimum wage is
Right, right.
many, many people work minimum wage jobs and they deserve a living wage as well,
Yeah.
of course.
And to go back to the inflation issue, like the won is also losing value against the dollar in
Against the dollar.
a
Yeah,
big way. So
I
the
know.
ability to go and travel and to go back to the States is really hampering a lot of people or students who study in the States, that study
Mm.
abroad. I mean, it's just crushing families. So yeah,
But
so it's a
again,
rough
for any
time.
American
Yeah.
listeners, now's your time.
Yeah, come
Come to
here. Yeah.
Korea. Shit is cheap
Oh
for
man.
you. Where it's almost 50% or not 50%. It's almost like a third less here.
You could come here
Yeah,
and just
it's
jump in a taxi and just drive, make a circle around the whole city.
yeah,
Cost you
pretty
nothing.
much.
Yeah.
Just about. So Americans, come on over
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. I would love to be earning US dollars right now. That'd be
for
fantastic.
sure. Yeah, that would definitely be the way to go.
Right on.
Nice. Well, hopefully the taxis will come out at night, and then hopefully we'll have in the next couple of years we'll have some really awesome, long park walkway that we can
Yeah.
all get a city bike and ride along.
It sounds wonderful. Let's hope it's not just a pipe dream. I hope they're
Yeah,
actually planning
these
this
are
out.
plans that I think are overall good. So we'll see what happens with them.
Yeah. Right on.
Nice.
Uh
Well,
so
that's as good a place as to wrap as any.
I think it's a good place to wrap. Yeah. It's too bad that Ryan missed the taxi talk though. That's
I
right in his
know
wheelhouse
he's
there.
our taxi guy here. I'm curious to get his take on this.
Yeah, for sure. If you guys could support the show by giving us a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts or your other podcast apps, that would really help us out. We do this show every twice a month. So every 2 weeks, we come out with a new episode. And you can go to our website, which is thesoulpatch.com, and you can listen to the show right there. And with that, I guess we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
Bye
Have a
bye.
good one.
My tainted perception distorts, my true meaning is blurred. I am lost to the echoes that whisper and speak in a mantra inventive in meaning, but lost to the darkness, consumed by my being. Destructive impurities nurture inside of me, constantly bound to an emblem of gluttony, feeding on impulse, adapting to fit to the constructed chaos accepted as it. In this complex of choirs I exist without sound, I am lost to the future, forced underground where I frequently polish the steel of my frame, tempering limbs while repeating my